First of all, I want to thank all of my new subscribers and pretty much welcome aboard. I hope you keep enjoying the videos that I make. Now, I was floored with the reactions to my previous lore video. I'm a completely new channel with almost no subscribers, and the reaction that video garnered really surprised me. So thank you all for that. Now, moving on to the topic of this video. The first area of the Ring City DLC is called the Dreg Heap. So, what is the Dreg Heap made out of? If we analyze most of this area, it is quite apparent that most of it is comprised of different parts of Lothric, as we can clearly see different areas of the High Wall of Lothric, complete with its dead dragons. Areas that have what is arguably a petrified pus of man next to one of the fountains we found on Lothric, as well as us falling through an area that is very clearly the Grand Archives. So, most of the buildings come from areas surrounding Lothric Castle. Now, what I'm most interested in is not where the buildings came from in this area, but its name, and its link to the rest of the lore of this game. Now, if we analyze what dreg means, it is basically the leftovers from a liquid substance, the sediments of a fluid, if you will. And there is a very important mention to the dregs previously in this game in the shape of a covenant item, the human dregs, proof of a duty fulfilled by the eldritch faithful, who patiently await the devourer of God's return. Dregs are the heaviest things within the human body, and will sink to the lowest depths imaginable, where they become the shackles that bind this world. So who is the devourer of gods? Well, for all of you my friends who have barely played the main game, or who have had trouble paying attention to the introduction cinematic, the devourer of gods is Aldrich. This is one of the nicknames that has been given to Aldrich. The other one is Saint Aldrich of the Deep. Aldrich was arguably once a cleric, as we can see in Hogwarts dialogue.
Let's take Aldrich for one, a right and proper cleric. Only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig, then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep, and they made him a lord of Cinder, not for virtue, but for might. Such as a lord, I suppose.
So there's a lot of information that we can gather from this dialogue. The first is that Aldrich was arguably a cleric of the church that preceded the Church of the Deep. We do not know exactly the name of the church or what deity it followed, but there are some statues covered all throughout the cathedral, as we can see here, which denote some kind of overthrow of the original church. There is a very interesting statue at the Cleansing Chapel, the one Slave Knight Gale is praying to. Now, a lot of speculation can be made of whose statue that is, but I believe there are a couple of clues that can reveal the actual identity of the statue. The first clue comes in the name of this chapel, the Cleansing Chapel. I believe this is the original name of this chapel, as very rarely do these kind of structures get renamed historically. So, what does the word cleansing reveal? Well, I believe that they are talking here of the cleansing of sin. And what deity is concerned with the tallying and pardoning of sin? You're right, Velka. We can also notice that from Gale's dialogue in the church.
Merciful goddess, mother of the forlorn, who have no place to call their own, please bear witness to our resolve. Fire for Ariandel. Fire for Ariandel.
The mother of the forlorn that he mentions here, and the deity related to the painted world of Ariamis in Dark Souls 1, is once again Velka. We can get some important insight into Velka from the item description of the Book of the Guilty in Dark Souls 1. The goddess of sin, Velka, oversees this list of the guilty, who have disrespected the gods or their covenants, and shall one day face the wrath of the Blades of the Dark Moon. So let's make sense of this item description. So obviously, if we pay attention to this item description, we can clearly notice that the work of Velka, at least originally, is very much on support of the gods, and it is the covenant that Gwendolyn oversees that makes sure that it gets enforced, again, at least originally. So we have a church devoted to the goddess of sin, and we have the Dark Moon Covenant enforcing it. We will revisit this point later, but I thought it was important to mention the original deity this cathedral was built for. Now, going back to Aldrich, I believe he was a regular man, until he started devouring other men. Arguably, when he was devouring them, he was also assimilating their souls, as in Dark Souls, the amount of souls one possesses within one's body directly determines the amount of power one has. So, through this process of devouring men and their souls, Aldrich became immensely powerful, to the point that his body was forced to change, and he ended up becoming an amorphous blob. Hey, don't ask me, this is just what happened. So, after Aldrich had become this powerful, someone very high up in the religion that preceded the religion of the Deep stuck Aldrich in the cathedral and made him into a Lord of Cinder. Now, we do not know for sure exactly who might have done this, but based on the fact that he was forced to become a Lord of Cinder and perpetuate the Age of Fire, there's a good chance that this might have been done under the orders of the Dark Moon Gwendolyn himself, or someone else that ranked high within the Order of the Dark Moon, which very easily could have been Pontiff Sullivan himself, at least before poisoning Gwendolyn and usurping the power in Anor Londo, and proclaiming himself Pontiff. Now, there's a lot of videos talking about the lore of Pontiff Sullivan, some a bit apprehensive about making one addressing it, but I don't know, I might end up making one in the future nonetheless. So time has passed, and the Bell of Awakening was tolled, reawakening Aldrich from the grave. At this point, Aldrich found a doll in his coffin, letting him know that his home was in Irithyll. So he proceeded to go there. The man who left the doll in the coffin was obviously Pontiff Sullivan, who had already made himself into a pontiff at this point, and had completely crumbled the structure of the Knights of the Dark Moon. At this time, he used a poisoned Gwendolyn and stuck both him and the newly awakened Aldrich in Anor Londo's cathedral, where Aldrich proceeded to slowly devour Gwendolyn. While he was devouring Gwendolyn, Aldrich dreamt of several things, like Priscilla of the painted world of Ariamis and her life-hunt scythe, which he can use in the battle against the Unkindled One. But more importantly, Aldrich dreamt of the Deep. Now let's go back to the religion of the Deep. I believe that from the moment Aldrich started devouring people to the moment he linked the fire, he slowly started influencing the deacons of the cathedral, and we do know he liked sharing his particular, how can we say it, inclinations from the Aldrich Sapphire. Aldrich, infamous for his appetite for flesh, apparently had the desire to share with others his joy of imbibing the final shudders of life while luxuriating in his victims' screams. Lovely. So, by indulging in the most savage and violent of emotions, I believe Aldrich started tainting his own humanity and the almost peaceful lure of the dark. We can see that a part of the dark brings a level of peace, however dubious or illegitimate it might be. As proof of this, we can look at Nashandra's description in Dark Souls 2. She brought a dark-like peace to the kingdom of Drangleic. But eventually Vendrick realized something was amiss. He fled and refused to take part in Nashandra's plans any longer. So, there is a calmness inherent to the dark, even though it can bring some other feelings to the surface. In the end, that is what I believe the deep is. Humanity corrupted and overridden by very measured, violent urges. Think of the urges of Patrick Bateman meeting Hannibal Lecter's. Now, there's no real mention of the deep being initiated. However, we can look at Archdeacon Mcdonald, whose corpse can be found in a waterway in Irithyll. Now, when one finds his corpse, one can pledge oneself to the Eldritch Faithful Covenant and protect Eldritch's slumber while he devours the Dark Sun. This is important for the Eldritch Faithful because it is through this sleep and the visions Eldritch finds within it that the secrets of the deep might be unraveled. There is one very important period of time, which we do not know how long it is, in which the Church of the Deep overruled the previous church that was found in the Cathedral of the Deep. I believe that this period of time was between the moment Eldritch was forced to light the fire and the moment he was reawakened, started devouring Gwyndolin, and started his lumber. During this time, Archdeacon Mcdonald started to switch the teachings from the previous church with the teachings that Eldritch had revealed through his life. I believe one of these teachings is the gluttony and the devouring of men. As proof, one can see Mcdonald's fat and bloated body. There are also several of the deacons that have become quite enlarged, so it is very apparent that gluttony is encouraged throughout this church. Another teaching that we can see is the ruling with might and not virtue, in a very much might makes right mentality, as well as reveling on suffering. A very clear indication that this is the case comes through the whispered dialogue of the deacon. We can clearly listen through this that the deacons, even though they fervently follow Saint Aldrich, still fear him, and arguably also Archdeacon Mcdonald. I think that they also, through the process of devouring men, their souls, and their essence, the archdeacons stumble upon the human dregs, which are the heaviest part of the human body. Now, one could only separate these different parts of the human body if the body is no longer in a solid state. So it could either be in a process of digestion, or they had been liquefied in order to be consumed in a different manner, leaving only the human dregs as a sacred artifact. Now, even though most of the aspects of the religion of the deep had been established, and a lot of the rituals finalized, I do not think that the church had had such a focus in the deep per se until Aldrich was reawakened, and he had dreamt of the deep specifically. I think this is why guarding Aldrich's sleep became so paramount for this religion, and why the Aldrich faithful guard his slumber with their own lives, as Aldrich's dreams gave the Church of the Deep the very deep meaning that it craved. Pun completely intended. Now, what does this have to do with the Ring City DLC? Well, as we have mentioned before, one of the most sacred elements of the religion of the deep comes in the form of the human dregs. And the religion of the deep believes they become the shackles that bind this world as they sink to the bottom. Well, the very first area of the DLC that we visit is called the Dreg Heap. When we fight through the Dreg Heap, we find ourselves fighting corpses that materialize from the ground, or the deep, if you will, called the Merc Men. The Merc Men scythe item description says, a short-shafted hand scythe wielded by the Merc Men who rise from the depths, enveloped by a black dampness and imbued with the strength of dark. So, the Merc Men rise from the depths, or the deep. And this is not the only link between the Church of the Deep and the Merc Men. For one, Merc Men sometimes draw up human dregs themselves. Another huge link between the Deep and the Dreg Heap comes in the shape of the Great Soul Dregs, a sorcery that fires great dark soul dregs that have stood for ages far within the deep. This sorcery is the highest form of deep soul. Some of the Merc Men who rise from the depths are possessed by soul dregs, which have a grave likeness to the human form. So as we can see, this sorcery not only comes from the deep, but if you look at it, it looks very much like a humanity sprite. So it lends credence to the belief that the deep is humanity tainted. We can see the Mercmen have a very, very big connection to the deep. But what does this mean in regard to the Dreg Heap and the lore of it? So yep, here we go folks. We finally come to it.
Speculation time.
So, of course, all the points I'm about to make here are speculation. So no, do not come back to me, hounding me because this is not an item description. I know it isn't, but let's move on. So there's a definite link between the Dreg Heap and Eldritch's Church of the Deep. What I believe happened is that, throughout time, the Eldritch faithful, while consuming people, accumulated more human dregs. In time, while the world shifted and everything started to go to the crapper, all of these dregs, the bodies and the Eldritch faithful, slowly condensed in a single space and ended up becoming the Dreg Heap. Not all of the Mercmen are cursed by the human dregs, but some of these, the stronger of the faithful, especially the ones that can cast Great Soul dregs, maintained the dregs they harvested from the humans they devoured and were eventually possessed by them. Of course, through time, their dominion over the sorcery Deep Soul increased gradually until Great Soul dregs was developed. In the end, even through Aldrich's visions of the deep and all of his deacons' devotion, we can see what becomes of that religion. Just like every other religion and human endeavor, it is all for naught. The flow of time cannot be stopped, and even if one might try to hijack the natural cycle of the world by, for example, artificially kindling a flame, or by consuming the souls and power of humans and gods alike, time is the only one that cannot be defeated, and it will prove that all enterprises are futile. So thank you very much for watching this video. I'm very interested in what you think about my theories, and even if you think I'm completely bonkers, I would like to hear what you think. So leave a comment down below. Also, if you like the video, please give it a like, and if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing to the channel. I will be seeing you soon, guys. Until then, this is Cheps.